Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our session today. It's really wonderful to see you all here. And thank you so much for introducing yourselves already in the chat. It's great to see you already from Idaho and Seattle and the Renaissance in New York City. Excellent. So, one thing while you're putting your comments in the chat, if you could tag it to everyone. Sometimes I think the default is that it goes to hosts and panelists, but which is okay if that's what you really want. But if you want everyone to see it, then you have to tag it to everyone. So, welcome to our session today, Fostering Civic Action in Youth. My name is Philippa Rappaport, and I'm the Head of Education and Engagement at the Office of Educational Technology. And I'm so pleased to introduce our panelists today. We have Jennifer Brundage and Sherelle Williams. They are both lead project specialists for partnerships and public engagement at the office of the Smithsonian Office of the Undersecretary for Education. We're also joined by Kim Robledo Diga, who's the Director of Learning and Audience Engagement at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, and also Abby Hitzman, who's a project manager for the Creating Portraits of Community program at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And then behind the scenes, we have Rhett Ransom from the Office of Educational Technology, who's providing IT support. So in our session today, we'll explore how educators at the Smithsonian are engaging young people in civic dialogue tied to their communities. So our presenters today will talk about a range of Smithsonian programs and resources that help youth interact with historical and contemporary sources to understand their local histories while also contemplating a future that is shaped in response to present-day priorities. These programs support youth in developing stronger civic identities and encourage them to take active roles in preserving and protecting the rich histories in the communities in which they live. And we'll explore case studies that model collaboration with students and action planning using historical sources, oral histories, photography, literature, art, and more to encourage youth voice as part of imagining any community's future. So as we get started, you're already introducing yourselves. I see more of you are, so thank you so much. If you need live captions, you need to click the Show Captions button. If you've joined us before, you know that we like these sessions to be as interactive as possible, so please feel free to put any comments, chat, questions, anything in the chat. And you can also use the Q&A button, and we'll also be fielding those. Those it might take us a little longer to get to, but we'll get to everything through the course of our session today. So today's session is the final one in our 10-part series that we've been running since September. And this is a series meant to celebrate America's 250th by exploring teaching strategies and resources to help tell the sort of the big stories and also the littler stories that maybe aren't told as often. And our intention is that you leave each session with a collection of techniques and ideas to help students think critically and recognize their own value, appreciate others' perspectives, and gain confidence to be engaged learners. It feels particularly poignant and very appropriate that we're closing out the series by honoring, by looking forward and by nurturing the next generation, by focusing on helping students to be engaged in their communities and the world around them, and by helping to prepare them to take the reins. So as I said, and there's also, we have a Learning Lab collection meant to, that complements our session today. I wanted to just go back to this page I was showing you. So I'll put this link in the chat. On this page, you can find all of the archived versions of the session as well as those collections. And after today, we'll be taking a break for the summer and we'll be planning the next series, which will start in September. And that series will focus on object-based learning. So you can find all of the information for next year's series on this page, and we'll be populating that over the next couple of months. Okay, so I'll put those two links in the chat. A reminder that this session is being recorded, and we always like to start out our sessions with a question. So we want to start today's session with this question: what does civic engagement mean to you? And I'll turn it over to Sherelle.
Thank you, Philippa. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Sherelle Williams. I want to first just welcome you all to this conversation and reiterate the question that Philippa has posed. What does civic engagement mean to you? Please do take a moment, write your answer, so that we might be able to start generating a conversation before we dig into the presentation that we've prepared for you. And as Philippa noted, it is worthwhile to ensure that you are sharing your response to everyone as opposed to the host and panelists, just so that we can surface those responses to the entire group. So Ravina here is saying, staying connected with what is going on in government at all levels. John is saying, creating space for the community to engage in conversation about what is important to them. Participating actively in the world around you is what Gingy has commented. And Amanda says, giving students the knowledge of how they can use resources in their community to solve problems and implement change. These are all fantastic answers and very much what we want to continue to, I think, reiterate through the program resources that we have on the website that we'll be talking about. So please continue to share your thoughts in the chat. And thank you for your responses. On the next slide, just to get us started in this conversation, I wanted to draw your attention to this statistic, which says the majority of young people ages 18 through 29 believe that the democracy they are experiencing today cannot solve the nation's problems and is not working well for their generation. So after reading that statistic, it suggests that students are not feeling confident about our current civic infrastructure and the ways that our current infrastructure serves them, which ultimately makes a compelling argument for why civic engagement is so critical right now. And on the next slide, when we think about civics, we often think about the broad or abstract nature of it. And educators may feel like it's hard to cover the entirety of what civics is in practical terms in their classroom using traditional means. In other instances, we might focus narrowly on just how government works. And so the two images on this slide here are meant to illustrate the connection between learning about civics and actively engaging in it, because both are needed for civic engagement. So in order for students to truly appreciate how our government and democratic institutions are maintained, it's also important for them to feel supported in making relevant connections to their daily lives. So things like volunteering, learning about the needs of their communities, speaking to community leaders and public officials are all valuable experiences for students that help them to reinforce their learning. And on the next slide, we'll begin to talk a little bit more about civic education at the Smithsonian website. Because we have this understanding that teachers can benefit from having tools that help them to create real world experiences and opportunities for their students to learn. And we've created the site, Civic Education at the Smithsonian, which can be found at s.si.edu/civic-education. because we wanted to make it accessible and available for educators to understand Smithsonian's approach to civic education. So this site features 6 programmatic frameworks that provide ready-to-use structured content to support the development of youth civic identities. And these publicly available collection of resources assist students in becoming more active participants in their local community. It reinforces their understanding of how democracy works and allows them to begin to build the skills they need to shape the world they want to live in. And so, with that, I will pass it on to my colleague Jennifer Brundage, who will be sharing a little bit more about what you can actually find on the site.
Thank you, Sherelle. And I'll just add my welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're obviously with the 250th anniversary, a lot of some of the topics that we're thinking about a lot in the news these days: freedom, democracy, community. And so we're very excited to be able to share this site with folks right here on the verge of our big anniversary celebration. On the next slide, we'd love to share with you some thoughts from our Undersecretary for Education, who talks about the Smithsonian's commitment to fostering civic engagement in youth.
As an educator, my highest priority is to provide students with well-rounded educational experiences, while also empowering teachers with the tools, information, and resources they need to facilitate these experiences. Students care deeply about their communities and often benefit from guidance that enables them to explore the various ways they can express their perspectives, concerns, and opinions. As the world's largest museum, education, and research complex, with a collection of over 157 million objects, works of art, and specimens, the Smithsonian has countless stories to discover that inspire youth to engage civically, amplify their voices, and envision the future they want to build. The stories we celebrate, commemorate, and contemplate are part and parcel to the democracy we hold dear. The different programs featured on this website demonstrate the various ways Smithsonian educators and museum staff engage youth in civic discourse. Through these lessons, we examine core American values and forge meaningful connections between the past, present, and future. Today, we aspire to support youth in leveraging history, art, culture, science, and education to shape the future they envision.
Thank you. And I put a link for those of you who weren't able to hear it. There is a link. They're all on YouTube right now. So yeah, no worries. But you can see, as many of you put in the chat, we too care about making sure that student voices are part of how our communities are changing for the better. And that's what you're going to find on this site in terms of resources. So we have a really about 35 or so resources on the site, all geared towards civic education. And it's a really varied group of resources. So you'll find some micro learning videos that get at things like civic dialogue and making sure that students are considering multiple perspectives. Another thing that was important to us was that you can take a program from beginning to end, like, for example, with a toolkit or with a group of lesson plans, and you can follow that whole trajectory of a program depending on the kind of time you have. Or we've also deconstructed some of these toolkits and resources. So if you just need something to help students research in a historical archive or a museum or a local historical society, or if you need some help generating oral histories, for example, and a template for that, you can also pull those things out. So depending on what kind of time you have, you'll be able to find a resource here that's useful to you. And as Dr. Chisholm mentioned, they do run the gamut of history, art, and culture. And many of them are also bilingual. So we encourage you to really take advantage, dig in, and take a look at the resources. One of my favorite parts of the site on the next slide are the student success stories. So what do students do with these resources? And we've asked the program leads to share some of the results that they've found out in communities across the United States working with these resources, and what the students have done with them, what they take on as projects. You'll find everything from a student designed youth summit to student exhibitions, community cooking classes, designing t-shirts. There's all kinds of ideas in the site to give you inspiration for what your students might do. And then finally, as Sherelle mentioned, on the next slide, you'll see we're profiling in this first iteration of the site, we're profiling 6 kind of signature Smithsonian programs that focus on civic engagement. And so today we've asked the program leads for 2 of these programs to take us on a deep dive through some of the things you'll find when you explore creating portraits of community and designing for change. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Abby to tell you more about creating portraits.
Thanks, Jen. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and share more about the Creating Portraits of Community project with you. So on the next slide, we have a question that I like to pose. We pose this to teachers and to our students. It kind of just brings the focus into the different topics we'll be working with our curriculum. So how are you bringing community into your classroom? If you would, go ahead and post your thoughts in our chat, and I would love to hear how you're bringing community into your classroom. Lisa says service projects. So getting our students to get outside the classroom and really engage with people in their community. Bringing guest speakers. Amanda says from the county elections. Oh, that's a great one, especially since we're having so many important elections at the moment. Visits by elected officials is another really good one. Educational projects and presentations reflecting local stories. Yes, we're really going to be diving into, with my project, how we help students bring out their local stories. Thank you all so much for your great comments. Please keep them coming in the chat. So on our next slide, we're going to look into a little bit of background about my project, the Creating Portraits of Community project. So our project works with teachers, Smithsonian museum educators, Smithsonian regional affiliate museums to build skills that enable students to collect portraits of their communities by taking photographs and collecting oral histories. The project accomplishes this in 2 phases, a building phase and a collection phase. First, participating teachers implement a curriculum created by SI museum educators and tested by teachers that builds visual literacy, critical thinking, interview, question generation, and discussion skills. Students then take these skills into their community and document the stories they want to tell. So this project is really student driven. They select a person, or like we like to say, a storyteller, to interview and take photos of, creating a multimedia portrait of a person in their community. Ultimately, student work made during the project is put into an online exhibition hosted by the Smithsonian American Art Museum on their website, along with the project curriculum to help celebrate American stories at the time of the 250th anniversary of the United States this year and beyond. So the image on our slide is actually one of the pages from our online student exhibition. And as you can see, this is highlighting works from students that we worked with in year 1 and 2 in Kentucky. So we're really excited about that. Now we'll dive into some curriculum content. On the following slides, we will work through a riff on the Project Zero thinking routine that is used in the Creating Portraits project curriculum. This routine really helps students engage with primary sources by really slowing down and using their own observations to develop and ask questions. So we're going to do just that. Let's take a minute to look at the photograph on the slide, maybe starting on the outside corners and moving our way in. You'll notice there is no information on the slide, and that's on purpose. We'll reveal that later. Also, if you want, I know Philippa will throw a link in our chat. If you would like to click on that and work with a more expanded version of the photograph, please feel free to do so. Also, as you're looking, please go ahead and throw your observations in the chat. No observation is too big or too small. We're just pulling out what we see. Jan's immediately looking at what's on her head. Is it a hat? Is it a headpiece? Jessica said the waterfall, so maybe thinking about where our sitters are. Sean's talking about human-made and nature-made water flow in the background. It looks like she's doing her hair for an event. So maybe thinking about, is she going somewhere after this, after they're done hiking? I have to say too, I always think about the man-made hose with the waterfall as well, and I think, where is this runoff coming from? Is there a dam? Is there a larger water source? So yes, all of these really great things. So from our observations about just looking at the photograph, we can start to make larger stories. So on our next slide, we are going to start to focus our looking a little bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look through our photograph through the 5 lenses that are on our screen. So we have cultural, governmental, economical, technological, and geographical. A lot of O's. And each will have us look at our photograph with a different focus. So what we'll do is I'll describe the lens, and then on our next slide, you'll get to pick one of these lenses and really hone in on that perspective and then make an open-ended question from that perspective. So with our cultural lens, you'll focus on factors like tradition, ritual, and values that are passed along. For governmental, you'll focus on the influence of law and politics. For economical, we'll focus on industry and wealth. Technological, the focus on evidence of tools and innovation. And lastly, geographical, with the focus on features of land and climate and the ways humans interact with the environment. Like a lot of us were already saying. Next slide, please. So like we said, we just looked closely at our photograph. So now, if you would, choose one of these lenses and look a little more closely at the photograph through that lens. And if you would, put your open-ended question in the chat box, I would love to hear your thoughts. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Okay, thank you. So to get us started off, some of the things I've really noticed, again, like we talked about, is I feel like a lot of times now technology has really crept into hiking a lot. So I think everyone goes hiking now and you have all of the gear and your shoes and your headbands. And I think almost getting back to basics of, oh, we can go on hikes just in our regular clothes or even in our curlers. So I think about different technological lenses that have changed over the years. Who is taking the photo? Very good. Hike equals long walk. Yes. Where was the photo taken? Is it a summer vacation? So getting into where this photograph was taken, it was taken in Kentucky, and actually it was taken with some grant funding from the National Endowment for the Arts to document communities around the 200th anniversary of the United States. So I like to bring this into the conversation too, and these are some of the photographs we chat about with our students in the curriculum as a means to talk about continuity and change over time. So what's different from our 200th anniversary until now? Is the photograph taken before a special occasion? What inspired the photographer to take this photograph in this environment? Did the photographer just happen across these people? Were they posed? Very good observations. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Also, just wanted to point out that even though we introduced these 5 lenses, this is kind of whatever works best for what you're working with. So you can really choose any kind of lens that you would like. For example, maybe you want to even look through like a different gender lens. Again, I know we're all coming from different disciplines, so really what lenses would work best for the focus you're working with your students. Okay, on our next slide, we'll now get to look at some of our student work from the project. So I really like this because, again, we have those historical photographs that were taken around the 200th anniversary, juxtaposed with some of our student works that were taken within the last couple of years. And I think they're interesting to have together. Again, we're thinking about continuity and change over time. So I was wondering if we have some time, we do, what your thoughts are about what these photographs can tell us about continuity and change over time. And if you would, like you are, so many really good responses in the chat. Talking about clothes from different time periods. John was saying, I think the photographer, husband and father, similar hats in Kansas and Kentucky, even though 50 years have elapsed, maybe similar clothing or clothing has stayed the same. Variation in photography practices and technology, yes. So maybe again, digital versus having a regular film camera can change how we set things up and how we pose our sitters. Yes, Lois, all the activities and social roles are still relevant. So I like these two because despite maybe there not being any kind of technology that we see, the people in the photographs are still doing the same things and still engaging with the person taking the photograph. So I think it shows that human connection still does stay the same. Again, thank you all for your great responses. So on our next slide, we're just going to look at some more student work. I just love to highlight this because really this is the ultimate goal of our project, is just highlighting different stories that students want to tell. So these were all taken by students across all of our sites that we worked with in the past. So Washington, D.C., Kansas, Kentucky, and yeah, Kansas and Kentucky. So also wanted to point out again that teachers in our project come from many different disciplines. So in the past, we've had art, photography, videography, history, and civics. So this really demonstrates how capturing student stories can really be adapted and approached in many different ways in the classroom. So in some classrooms, maybe there was more a focus on the composition of the photograph, and then maybe in other classrooms, the focus was maybe more on how the person is telling the photo story in their space with their things. So again, this can really be adapted for any discipline. Next slide, please. So to end with, in thinking about what students and photographers have captured, why is it important to document, share, and preserve our stories? And again, I know we've been touching on these things throughout our brief little session today, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this question. And also maybe we're questioned out. I realize I asked you guys a lot of questions, but I feel like getting feedback from you is the most important part of doing sessions. Jan is saying learning from the past helps us prepare for the future. What is old is new again. Amanda's saying to make the past relatable to the present. Kaya, sorry, I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Our histories are the background that shape our communities and present our lives. So really important to document our histories and really share those stories for the future. Well, thank you all so much for participating and all of your wonderful comments. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and think about another one of our wonderful civic projects. So we're going to look at how we can take a community issue or challenge and use the design process as a means to work on it. So I'll hand you over to my colleague, Kim.
Perfect. Thank you, Abby, and welcome everyone. Excited to be here. Again, my name is Kim Robledo-Diga. I work at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum here in New York City. We're not on the mall in Washington, but we're on the Museum Mile in New York, and our collection spans from historic to contemporary design. So, just gonna give a little insight to where we're coming from here. Next slide, please. So we'll start off like you're probably wondering, why is design part of this conversation? I actually saw some people mention design in the chat, which was fantastic early on. But let's just start here in the chat. What does design mean to you? When I say design, what would you or your students define this as? If you can add it to the chat, that would be great to see the variety. Okay, Lois said creation, fantastic. Renaissance says create, functional. Jean mentioned architecture, the field of design. Amanda, visual. Gayla, creating something new. Ash, innovation. Dr. Carmen, beauty. Excellent. So yes, those are all fantastic structure, project-based, fantastic. These are all wonderful definitions of design. When the next slide. And there's lots of definitions to design. That's the beauty of it, so flexible. But when people mostly think about design, they think about uh, beauty, like some people said, innovation. They also think about design fields like graphic design and product design, fashion and architecture, all correct definitions. But what we want to talk about in design in today's activity is how it can be used as a tool for creating positive change. So if you can go to the next slide. And when we think about design, we often think of designers and professional designers, like the professional architect or fashion designer, but we are designers ourselves. We problem solve, we have creative problem solving that we do in our daily lives. So that's something that's wonderful about design. It's so accessible because we do that all the time. Youth, adults, everyone does it. And these are some really fun examples of how we do this as just regular human beings trying to problem solve. We have on your left, if you're a parent or an aunt or an uncle or grandparent, you've seen the drippy ice pop just dripping down your kid's arm, which is sticky and no one loves that. So using a cupcake holder to, minimize that dripping. And then to the top right, we've seen the multiple uses of tennis balls. They're inexpensive, they're accessible, they're found everywhere, and they can be used on walkers. You see them on canes. You see them on chairs in schools and libraries, and they solve the problem of that kind of noisy scratching of the floor and that screeching sounds that really bothers some in a really low impact way. It solves that problem. And then the bottom right is just a fun one. We're from New York, so we don't have goats floating around, but I saw this and I was like, a pool noodle, fantastic design tool. I assume that these goats were piercing some things they weren't meant to pierce. So someone just inserted some pool noodles and it's safe engagement for everyone. So these are kind of fun and funny, but it really is meant to show you that we do this all the time. We problem solve all the time. And what we talk about when we speak about the design process, it's really refining that problem solving. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the design process is not linear, though I'm showing it to you today linear, just for ease of presentation. There's many terminologies, there's many ways to visualize the design process. There's 100 different ways you can approach it, but fundamentally, it's defining or understanding the problem, empathizing, brainstorming, coming up with ideas and wild ideas, prototyping, working through ideas, getting feedback, with testing, and then launching the project, sharing this with others, seeing if it works. So I'm seeing in the chat, someone says, do the goats try to take off the pool noodles and eat them? I don't know. For anyone here who is a goat farmer or knows about goats, please put that in the chat. I'd love to know that answer. So in the Designing for Change toolkit that is as part of this site, you'll find guidance and activity sheets on each of these steps for the design process for students. It's available in English and in Spanish and has a facilitator pages to it. So as an instructor, teacher like yourselves, or as a student leader, it helps give some facilitator notes to enhance those steps and those experiences and help move the project along further. We can go to the next slide. So for today's presentation, I want to focus on one of those steps of the process, which is observe and define. It's honestly likely the most important step. If you're not defining the challenge and understanding it from the get-go, then you've set off a poor foundation for the balance of your work. So this is the time where you spend your most work. I want to share a quick activity that's really easy to do, something you can do in your classroom tomorrow. And it's kind of fun and playful, but it really sets you up for how quickly and easy you can get to utilize the design process and think about your audience and your stakeholders. So let's get into it. Okay, so these are all chairs. Can we all agree on that? We have 3 chairs here. Which one is the classroom chair? If you can add it to the chat, A, B, or C. Which is a chair you find in a traditional classroom? Okay, I can't even read them fast enough. I have lots of C's going on. Julian and Adriana and Gayla says C. I'm hoping for an A or B in there from someone, but it doesn't look like it. So yes, C is definitely B. That would be fantastic. But C is clearly the answer, but why isn't chair A or chair B in the classroom? Can anyone put that in the chat? Can you tell me they're all chairs, they all function for what we need for students to sit down. Why don't schools have chair A or chair B, the office chair or the kind of lazy boy recliner? Julian says hard to stack, the cost. Someone just, I was going so fast. Space, cost and space, cost and position. David said won't pay attention. Rose ergonomic requirements. Excellent. So now that we discussed that, we know that the user of the chair is a student. So typically designers design for a user. So you're trying to please a user. So a student, if we ask them to pick which chair they would want, they would likely pick B or A. The last choice they would probably put in the chat is C. And because the user is what designers typically design for, they have to think about the whole ecosystem and all the other stakeholders and all the other constraints that come a part of the design process. In addition, so that you need to kind of look at that. So thank you, you're already ahead of me. Perfect. So when we think about a school chair, now we've already defined the student as one of the stakeholders. Who are the other stakeholders related to a classroom chair? If you can put that in the chat, who else is involved with that chair and making decisions about it? We have teachers, custodians, maintenance, administrators, bean counters from Jan, correct? Facilities, Natalie. Gingy said principal and teachers. Claire said families. Excellent. So you can see there's lots of stakeholders who are part of the decision making when someone's considering designing a chair for a student. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I want you to all, and there's a big list here. Thank you all for putting those great stakeholders in the chat. Think about one stakeholder that you want to think about, we want to identify. We had students, we had families, we had teachers, we had principals, we had administrators, we had facilities team members. I think those were some of the few. Pick one and just hold that in your mind. You don't need to put it in the chat. What are the needs of that stakeholder? And just think about that. So if you chose the administrator, what are their needs when they're thinking about this chair or student's chair? And if we can go to the next slide. And keep that same stakeholder in mind. You've already identified some of their needs. Now spend a little bit more time also in thinking about what are the constraints that they have. What are the constraints? Because the constraints happen in every part of the design process. There's nothing happens in life without some constraints and boundaries. And that actually brings out creativity. So think about a couple of constraints. And when you're ready, in the chat, if you can write, who is your stakeholder you identified along with one of their needs and one of their constraints. So put in the chat, the stakeholder you have identified, let's say the administrator, one of their needs and then one of the constraints, even though there's multiple, just to give us a sense. So Elizabeth put the admin, and one of their constraints is likely budget, very fair. Teacher for Claire, and the space is a constraint. Facilities for Vicky, easy to clean. Gala, it's administrative space in the classroom, correct. Facilities and costs, fantastic. Excellent. And administrator, excuse me, durability and cost. And stackable, yes. We can go to the next slide. So here you can see I just picked one of the stakeholders, which some of you have also. The custodian needs are stackable, easy to clean, lightweight. Sorry, I'm dry mouth here. Durable, easy to repair. And the constraints are space, cleaning needs to happen in the classroom, and there's a modest repair budget. Next slide, please. So remember this image that Abby shared earlier? She asked, "What do you notice?" And observation is key to her activity. And sometimes the lens you look through is also the lens you solve through. The same observation skills you use in this photo exercise are the same skills you would use as a designer in the process. And observation is essential. Listening, interviewing is important, but not all truth lies in what people say. Sometimes you have to observe what they're doing. And a good example of that is when you ask people, "How was your day?" And everyone says, "It's great." When we know likely their day is not 100% of the people you've met that day had a great day. So let me share some design examples on how observation led to a better solution for a greater to help a community through the lenses that Abby shared, which is the cultural, governmental, and economical. You can go to the next slide. And this is where observation is important. So cultural, in the top left, some of you might have heard this product, and they sell it at REI and some sporting goods store called the Life Straw. Very popular if you're a camper or a hiker. You likely use it. For those of you who knew this product from many years ago, it was actually created to help communities who don't have access to clean water. So it was a way to drink water and filter it through this really lightweight, easy to use device. This project from the beginning was a complete failure because the designers actually failed to observe and understand what the community needed. And what they came to find out later is communities that typically lack access to clean water are not, especially in continents like Africa and South America, usually have water collected by an individual, and they bring back water to their community to drink it as a family or as a community. They're not individually going to a water source and consuming water at the source, like you see in this photo. And another thing was a lot of the need is most is for children who need hydration the most. The strength you would need to suck through the filter and to draw the water through the filter to drink it was too hard for a young person. So these are the type of things where the designers, though the intention and the design product worked perfectly, there's a lack of understanding of understanding how water has been collected with that community through generations is one example of something that didn't go well. In the center example is a fun one. In the New York City subways, we had a campaign a few years ago. This under governmental, this dude, "Stop the spread, please," because there was that kind of understanding that, gentlemen tend to take a little bit more space in the seating area than women. And it was really a campaign to remind gentlemen to really stay as compact as possible to allow seating for as many thousands and tens of thousands of people who come to New York on New York subways. And then you see on the right, economical, people recognize that people love to do everything with their phones, so putting pay. The bottom left, technological, this is early stages of some self-driving cars. And they noticed that when cars pull up, a driverless car pulls up and goes to a stop sign, that people who are crossing were very hesitant to cross in front of the vehicle, even though the vehicle was clearly stopped. And what they observed, and this is where a positive thing happened, as designers were observing that the people as they're walking across the street were looking to get that eye contact with the driver. And you don't realize you're doing it, but you're looking at the driver looks at you, and you've acknowledged, I see you, you see me, and then I feel comfortable crossing. That cannot happen in a driverless vehicle. So they recognized that was a key human element that needed to happen. So they created this digital sign that says waiting for you to cross, which is a signal that the car, I see you and I'm waiting for you to cross. So it was a wonderful solution to that. And then geographical, we see on the right that this is called a classic design lesson, the desired path. The landscape designer can design as much as they want. People will take the path that they want. So it's really not someone not understanding the path people take and designing against that. So these are just fun ways that designers have either succeeded with observation understanding or failing. If you can go to the next slide, please. And most times, challenges or opportunities start with just one person's needs or the needs of people from the fringes of society. So and often solving for individuals or smaller sets of people often benefits that larger community. But you don't realize it maybe when it's happening. So on the left, I don't know if anyone has the Good Grips potato peeler or any kind of Good Grips products that you might find at a Target or Walmart. That was actually designed by a designer, a product designer who his wife was struggling with arthritis in her hands. And at the time, potato peelers, for those of you who are a little bit my age or older, you remember that kind of metal potato peeler. And she really she loved to cook, and she really couldn't function with that potato peeler, the classic one that our grandparents or our parents had. So he started to design a thicker band and something more ergonomic. And you can see some of his prototypes in the bottom left. And that led to a product that his wife can use with her arthritis. But then through time, people realized this is comfortable and functions for a variety of people in the greater population. Now, this is the most common way that you see potato peeler and other kitchen device products. And on the right is that curb cut, originally designed due to laws in this country for ADA compliance. And it was meant for wheelchair users to be able to cross the street. But it actually benefited a broader community. If you have a stroller as a parent, if you have a walker as an elderly person, children use it, people on bicycles use it. So it's one of those things where sometimes you design for one, and if you find that it really benefits everyone. If you can go to the next slide, please. So these are just examples of how design and its process can really take you through understanding who the user is, through observation, understanding, really have a good sense of what that need is, and to come up with a solution that really works. And that process that we went through, that design with the custodian, that slide with all of the constraints and needs, that's really the beginning of a design brief. And so if you start that with your students, and all you have to do is one by one, okay, it has to be stackable, it has to be easy to clean, it has to be lightweight. Then you just have to answer those questions. That's where the designer challenge is. And that's how you know, here's my design brief, and here's now I know what I have to do. So my challenge to you and your students is identify what bugs you, right? In your community, in your classroom, and community can be your own classroom, literally, or your school, or your town, or your state, or the nation. And what bugs you? And then what are you going to do about it? And it's really just an invitation. Design is an invitation to not just accept what exists, but to really decide, I can do this better, or I can make positive change with my peers in my community. So that is it for me. And I think I'm meant to pass it off back to Philippa. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. So we're going to move into Q&A now, but before I stop sharing the screen, I wanted to just leave this QR code. We would really love to have your feedback about today's session, so please feel free to take out your phone and do that. And I also just put that link in the chat. So I'll just give it a little bit up on the screen. But does anyone have any questions, comments? I don't think there's anything that we missed previously. I was surprised no one mentioned the mom's pants at the waterfall.
I almost did. I was like, the question was like, where did she get those fantastic pants? Those like fishnet pants.
They're so great. All right, well, I think that's up there enough, so I'll stop sharing. Are there any comments or questions? It looks like perhaps no, but let's just wait another teeny bit. And what I will say is, really, I just want to thank everyone for coming, to our presenters today. There's just so many amazing resources and programs going on, and it's really wonderful to share them all. Oh, here's a question. What are your thoughts on special educational needs in this context?
I'm happy to take that if it's all right. So, I, came from the classroom and I worked with early learners. And when I think back to some of the experiences that I had in my classroom and things like creating portraits for community, talking about pictures, describing what you see, creating moments that are, you know, increase the sensory or tactile experience for the student, there's value in that. And that can translate into deeper conversations, like thinking about what Kim shared. We have a chair. Does it work for everyone? Maybe, maybe not. So, like, you can incorporate some critical thinking and analysis in there. So, I think there are ways to still engage students with various needs across the continuum of human experience. And I think a lot of the approaches that we're featuring here do a great job of that. They create that open-ended opportunity for teachers and students.
Thank you, Sherelle. Any other thoughts from our presenters? Maureen says, thank you for this launch of information. Great, thank you. Um,
I would add to the special education needs. I think
oh,
that curb cut example is we do lots of programming here at Cooper Hewitt with people with varied abilities and cognitive abilities, physical abilities. And the beauty of that is, and the beauty of design is they're the experts of that information, that context, their environment, the way they live, their challenges, what works, what doesn't. And so we do lots of programs. We actually had an exhibition years ago called Access Plus Ability, and it was all ways that this community has designed for themselves because there honestly haven't been solutions made for them for all their needs or their very, very specific needs. So it was what we found so amazing is this community's really stepped up and started to problem solving for themselves. And the beauty is they bring that expertise. And just like the OXO grip and the curb cut is like what we have to realize is that some of those solutions can really impact the broader community. We work with varied communities. It's always an electric time moment in those workshops, and we love it. I think they're one of our favorite audiences.
thank you, Kim. I wanted to just highlight, Jessica had sent a comment just to hosts and panelists, but she says, I would love to share as a homeschooler to a child on the spectrum, I would agree. In my experience, observation is a key skill of theirs. Build on it. Yeah. All right. Any other comments, questions? I'll take this opportunity to remind you that we will take a break for the summer. But I've just put this link in the chat, and that's where you can find the archived versions of any of the Cultivating Learning sessions, either from the past 10 sessions in the series or from previous ones from other years. And this is the same page where we'll host information about the upcoming series that we'll start back up in. It will also be the third Wednesday of every month, starting in September on object-based learning. So I think nothing else is coming in. Some shout outs for Project Zero. We love it too. We use it all the time. And just really thank you to all our presenters today and to all the participants for coming to our session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.